I've been writing software since I was 11, from the 1980s. I've always been writing software. I've worked in a whole bunch of interesting industries. What makes you a winner is having the right mental attitude. The old cliche, getting your head into the game.
What do you think is one quality that separates good leaders and great leaders? So, do you think that scope creep and feature creep are the same thing or they are different?
Regardless of how you're actually delivering the product, you have to have an idea of what the product is and how that product ties into the company's strategy. It takes a lot of effort to come up with good strategy, with good OKRs, and with clear outcomes. And if you don't, then you see people just drifting around.
Hello everyone, welcome to BetterTech. So today I have with me Richard. Hello Richard, how are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. Yourself?
I'm doing well, thanks for asking. So Richard, first of all, thank you very much for making the time. I appreciate it. You taking the time out and speaking with us about your experiences, and then, really share your thoughts on various topics that we are going to cover today. So we will start with the $1 million question. Who is Richard?
I'm somebody who likes creating things. I've been writing software since I was 11, from the 1980s. I've always been writing software. I've worked in a whole bunch of interesting industries. I was in telecoms, doing mobile phones back in the 90s. Over at BlackBerry for a while, where I was working on things like video calls and sort of exciting BBM type stuff. Spent time at Amazon, where I own the warehouse quality tools for the items within warehouses worldwide, and sort of in Canada, in the US, I worked in Germany, and in the UK over the last 10 years or so, I've been working in retail. So companies, the Hook Group and Very, who lots of British people know, Littlewoods, and now I'm a founder within a startup called Head Coach, which is looking at teaching young athletes how to have a better mental well-being and how to approach sport with much higher levels of emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds pretty exciting. But talking about your journey, it had been like all over the place. You have worked on mobile phones, you have worked on AWS, software development, embedded systems, whatnot. So which of these domains you liked the most or was most, I would say, interesting for you, and why?
Yeah. So I get asked this question a lot because I am quite a generalist with my background, and that sort of puts me in a spot because what I really like is complicated problems, and systems. So I don't really, complicated algorithms, great, complicated maths, great, but that's other people are much better than I am. I like complicated systems, so I've really got into retail because when you look at retail, it's probably one of the most complicated end-to-end systems we have, where at one end you've got, B2B or B2C, people buying your product. So you've got all the association, all the problems of finding the product, of buying it, selection, all the rest of it. On the other end, you've got all your suppliers, how you deal with your suppliers, your warehousing in the middle, your logistics, your management of different types of orders. B2B orders are different from B2C orders. So really, retail is where I find the most interest in what I do. So that's when it comes to technologies, retail also has a wide range of different types of technologies which get applied. So, it's not just a case of a server in AWS with a database and a front end. There's so many different types of legacy systems out there. There's so many different types of ways of working that it's really complicated. So yeah, probably retail.
All right. So, your current role right now, it's with a startup, right? Where you are, as you said, helping athletes with their mental well-being. Which is sort of a very, you can say, talked about topic these days. Mental health. So what sort of things you have observed that are specifically from a mental health perspective more common in athletes as compared to other people?
Yeah. So firstly, we make a differentiation between mental well-being and mental health. So we're a well-being app. We're not a clinical app. We're not there to help
Okay.
people who have mental health issues. What we're about is being able to help athletes build a stronger mental well-being. Now, this is important in the game. So, it's great to have physical skills. You're a great soccer player. You can chip the ball. You can run with it. You're a great badminton player. You're a great pole vaulter. The physical skills get you noticed. But what makes you a winner is having the right mental attitude. The old cliche, getting your head into the game, and the mental attitude towards your game is commonly called emotional intelligence. This doesn't just exist for while you're in sports. It exists throughout your whole life. If you learn to have strong emotional intelligence, if you learn to have strong mental well-being, then you're better off and more resilient later on. And to your question in particular, this is particularly important for athletes. With athletics, if you're a good athlete, if you're going for it, if you're a sports person or whatever, you're giving yourself completely to what you're doing. You can't, be a great footballer, be a great runner if you're only half-hearted. You have to give yourself, which is an all-encompassing thing. And the thing about athletes is, even if you're the best, it comes to an end. You get to your your late 20s, early 30s, you're not as good as the younger people. It's even worse if you don't actually make the grade. So every place in Canada is the hockey, in the UK it's football, soccer, and in the US, of course, there's baseball and football in particular, where you have a lot of people entering, but very few make the grade. And therefore, you got a lot of people, especially in the teenage and early 20s, who are totally engaged, but then suddenly are no longer engaged.
Yeah.
And this is where you have mental well-being issues, mental well-being, developing it, being strong, being resilient, having self-conscious, self-confidence, being conscious of your impact on others. These all things help you deal with that transformation from being an athlete to not.
Yeah, absolutely. But don't you think in this age of social media, where there's a lot of artificial things and people just posting themselves all around, do you think it has an impact on mental well-being, or is it like just a thought of people and which they share with others?
I don't think it's being controversial to say, yes, absolutely. Social media has a massive impact on people's mental well-being. I was a very early pioneer in social media, working with BlackBerry, BBM, and by extension with other social medias which are starting up back in the 2000s. And even back then, you could see how people were starting to compare themselves to others. So even if we just stopped at comparison, that's bad enough. But of course, what we have now is very toxic social media, where under the claim of freedom of speech, people think it's okay to be as nasty and as mean as possible. And if you're nice, if you say, actually, let's not be mean, they have this terrible "you're woke" insults, which is just basically you're just being nice to others. But so this has made it a lot worse. People feel they have to be mean, and you see it. You see athletes who get all sort of vile stuff. A footballer didn't play very well in one game, and suddenly there's this outflowing of quite horrendous stuff, quite hateful stuff towards them, just because they didn't play well in one game. And that has a huge impact on anybody. It doesn't matter how brilliant you are. That is hugely impactful on you.
So, coming back to the tech side of things, you have worked as a CTO, you have worked as a head of engineering, and now you are working as a CPTO. So what is the difference, in your opinion, among like CPTO and CTO?
So I tend to look at whether the technology is your product. So if you take a shop, so Amazon or the Very in the UK, you have a shop. The product is the things you're selling. So your dresses, your shoes, your whatever, those are your products. And the CPO should be responsible for the product, for the mix of stuff they're selling. So absolutely, in a shop, a CPO and a CTO are quite different. When your product's actually your technology, so in Head Coach, our product is the app which people are buying,
Yeah.
and access to our training materials. Our product, therefore, is actually inseparable from the technology. It's one and the same, and therefore, to me, a CPTO makes sense in that situation where I'm looking after the product as it develops, and all through the technology, they are the same thing. So that's where I see where sometimes CTO makes sense, sometimes CPTO. And then you've got the grey area in the middle where your products can extend to much more stuff. So you could have a company where you're selling technology. There's a great product called Matillion out there, which does allows you to bring together different data sources and store and deal with as a part of a data pipeline. The product is purely technical, but actually the business is much bigger than that. They have professional services. They have all sorts of other stuff, which training and so on. And therefore, having a separate CPO makes sense in that sort of environment where actually, although the product's technology, the thing you're selling is way bigger than just the technology. So it's a case of how much is just purely technology that you're selling, and how much is other stuff which needs to be considered outside of your technology.
So, I mean, since you are on the product side as well, then you must be like really involved in feature development as well as feature identification, maturing it, grooming it, right? And within product or any software development project, scope creep is one of the most dangerous things. Or, I mean, some people call it feature creep as well. So, do you think that scope creep and feature creep are the same thing or they are different? And typically, I mean, how do you manage this sort of creep happening in the product development life cycle? And what are some of the signs that you think exist to say that you are on the verge of a scope or a feature creep?
So one of the things I've noticed over the last several decades of being in the industry is that there's been a reduction in time spent thinking about what we want to make before we start making it. And that sort of makes sense. You know, we used to have old systems where we would spend 18 months trying to specify everything before we wrote a line of code. And things like that don't work. And that's why I moved into agile type ways of working. Regardless of how you're actually delivering the product, you have to have an idea of what the product is and how that product ties into the company's strategy. If we don't think about it, then you start discovering stuff right at the end of the process. So if you haven't decided my product is my feature is going to be this, and I've thought about my feature and I've worked out how the users interact with it and all the rest of it, that's my feature and that's what I'm going to deliver. If you don't think about that up front, then when you get to the end, you suddenly find all these little use cases and no one's thought about, what happens if you did this? What happens if you did that? And you then have to make decisions on the fly. Do I support that? Now, it's your question, how do you recognize when you're starting to get creep in your scope or your features? It's when you start making on the fly decisions. It's when you start going, oh, we've discovered this. What do we do? And then you make something up. And then 2 weeks later, oh, we'll make something else up. Oh, we'll make something. Because at that point, you've lost sight of where you're stopping. You haven't got a roadmap anymore. You're just randomly walking around responding to events that are happening to you, rather than being in control of where you're going. So yes, it's when you start having to make on the fly decisions without thought about where does this come from.
And how do you normally ensure that your project or product development methodologies and process in general is aligned with the company's vision overall? And how you, I mean, keep your focus on something which is really the true value for your users, and not like engaging in features which are not necessary and you are just developing those for the sake of developing that.
It has to stem from the senior people within the company putting a day's work in. And that may sound, oh my gosh, but you have, in my experience, as you go further up, you become further and further detached from the workings of the company. And it becomes easier to make quick decisions because it just feels like I'll give it to somebody else. When you're in that situation, you start not really being clear about what you want to achieve. And if the leadership aren't clear about what they want to achieve, then it's no surprise when the people below them are just working on this or that and not really sure. So right at the beginning, you have to be really clear, right at the front. This is what our strategy is, and this is what we want to achieve. And that has to be owned by the CEO. The CEO has to own the strategy for the company, be it over the next year, the next 5 years, doesn't matter. They need to be able to say, this is what we want to achieve. This is how we think we're going to achieve it. It doesn't mean you can't change it, but it shouldn't be something that you're constantly changing. It shouldn't be something that's done on the fly. It's something which you need to sit down, think about, and be sure that you want it to work. Thereafter, when you start thinking about then the initiatives, so how do I deliver this strategy? Well, I have a bunch of initiatives. I'm going to do these initiatives. Again, initiatives aren't detailed. They sort of give you a flavour. But you need to work through those initiatives. Okay, well, what projects are going to work? I'll deliver that. And if you tie them together, if you're saying, okay, this strategy is delivered using these initiatives, which are delivered around these projects, and these projects have these outcomes, then you start getting a better idea of how what happens at the top is tied to the work being done at the code or the product side. That's actually really hard. I'm a big fan of things like OKRs. I'm a big fan of being clearly outcome driven, and I'm a big fan of people using KPIs in a sensible fashion. In order to say yes, we are moving in the right direction. They're hard to pick though. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of effort to come up with good strategy, with good OKRs, and with clear outcomes. And if you don't, then you see people just drifting around. I've been in one company where they were spending £1 million every year with a team playing around with the basket. They had this grand target of improving conversion rate on basket. Commercial baskets actually have a surprisingly low conversion rate. It's surprising how often it's 35%. Because people go and put stuff in and then never buy them because it's online. Who cares? Ebbs and flows, and people are getting really excited about 0.1% increase. And then next week it'll drop off because it's nothing, but they were spending vast amounts of money because they were making work up because they didn't have a clear idea of how what they were doing tied to whatever it is the CEO wants to achieve. And that's the sort of stuff you need to look for, is people just making stuff up because they don't really know what it is that the company needs to do to be successful.
So, can you sort of summarize an explicit example that you think was a cause of a feature creep and that had a large impact on any of the work that you have done? From any of your past experience.
Probably one of the worst. Again, I'll avoid naming companies, but
That's for sure.
We're working on a website. It was for companies who are effectively white labeling our product. It's probably we're white labeling and it was a historic revenue stream, but actually wasn't generating any real revenue now. So it was just like, oh well, it used to bring in a lot of money. Therefore, so they decided they wanted to do a rewrite of the website. Took my team about 3 months to do the website, which was about, we ended about a week late from what we originally. So performance-wise on the team, it was great. But actually, what was the purpose of what we were doing? What was meant to be on the website? How was it supposed to work? None of that was thought through because it was just simply, we used to have this, or it's an existing revenue stream. We just need to modernize it. So nobody actually put the time in to think about what that really meant, nor the impact on the overall business by doing this. While we were spending 3 months trying to make this website work, trying to work out what was wanted, the real problem was sitting there in the background, not being worked on. And then it came to light when the CEO sat down and asked me where we were with this other thing. And I was like, we haven't started it. And he wasn't very pleased, understandably. Because we were working on this thing which was actually irrelevant in his eyes. It was irrelevant. So we had failed on a number of points. The CEO didn't know what we were working on. We weren't clear about what he thought was the most important thing that we should have been working on. And the people who were defining what we were working on basically waved their hands and went, "Oh, it's like it used to, like it was, 3 years ago, whatever." None of us were in the company 3 years ago. Like, whatever.
That sounds like a classic example of a mix of priorities and not aligning expectations correctly or taking the stakeholders on board. So while we are approaching towards the end, let's do a quick rapid fire. So I will just ask you smaller questions. You're going to say the first word or first small sentence that comes to your mind. So I'll start right away. So what do you think is one quality that separates good leaders and great leaders?
Empathy.
All right. And what one industry you think AI will completely change or transform?
What industry? It's already destroying recruitment, and it'll eat up anything which is anything which has processes which requires someone to think about and in a repetitive manner. I mean, it's hard to point at one.
So, what is the best advice that someone has given you when you were their leader?
When best advice I was given from somebody who I was in charge of these.
Yes, you were leading them.
I was leading them. I'm very keen on going ahead, making things happen, and sometimes I need to be reminded to breathe, slow down for a second, just think about what we want to achieve here.
A book that you would recommend?
I just love The Innovator's Dilemma, and also The Four Disciplines. The Innovator's Dilemma, because you see the patterns talked about in the book all the time, where companies abandon the entry level for their product, and they try to, and we see it now. Land Rover Jaguar is doing it. We've seen it multiple times. BlackBerry did it. You see it all the time, where they just abandon because they think the going up market can be expensive, and you just die that way. It's the Innovator's Dilemma, and the Four Disciplines, because I think McChesney and Covey have really sort of captured the idea that the world's operational, and if you and operational consume you, and if you really want to make change, you have to step out of that operational world and think about what change really looks like. And I think they're just two great books.
A movie that you would recommend?
I'm a real sucker for sort of things like Grease and Dirty Dancing and stuff like that, because I just find them, they just take me away, and I don't need to worry about anything or try too hard.
What is your leadership philosophy in one sentence?
Try to keep it fun.
All right. Okay. So yeah, Richard, it was really fun talking with you and going through your journey, figuring out how you have reached where you are, what sort of challenges you have faced, and how you have overcome those. So, I mean, I really look forward to hosting you again on another podcast, which is sort of more focused maybe on AI or transformations or, other exciting topics in tech. And then we can focus more on that particular niche and update our audience on what you are up to.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's
so thank you again for your time today, and you have a nice weekend and stay safe. Have a good one.
Yeah. Bye-bye.